The Federal Evidence Facility occupies a secure warehouse on the outskirts of a major city, surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with razor wire and monitored by surveillance cameras. Inside, rows of steel shelving units hold thousands of items seized during criminal investigations. Drugs, cash, electronics, and weapons awaiting trial evidence presentation or eventual destruction. Access requires security clearances and biometric authentication, with all entries logged in databases tracking who handles what evidence and when. The facility represents the secure chain of custody that makes criminal prosecutions possible. One federal agent has worked in the evidence facility for 11 years, managing the weapons section, where firearms seized during investigations get cataloged, stored, and tracked through legal proceedings. His duties include receiving weapons from field agents, documenting their condition and serial numbers, maintaining storage security, and preparing items for court presentations. Supervisors consider him reliable and detail-oriented, someone who understands the critical importance of evidence integrity. His performance reviews consistently praise his professionalism and dedication to proper procedures. What supervisors don't know is that the agent has been systematically stealing weapons from evidence storage for 6 years. He identifies firearms that will eventually be destroyed rather than returned to owners, removes them from inventory through falsified documentation, and sells them through intermediaries who distribute to criminal networks across multiple states. The thefts exploit his intimate knowledge of evidence procedures and the gaps in oversight that allow trusted personnel to operate with minimal supervision once they've established reputations for reliability. The scheme began during budget cuts that reduced staff in the evidence facility. The agent found himself working alone during evening shifts, responsible for processing incoming evidence without the second-person verification that procedures technically required, but resource constraints made impractical. He realized that weapons designated for destruction created opportunities because destroyed items disappear from inventory legitimately, making it difficult to distinguish between proper destruction and theft if documentation gets falsified carefully. The agent's methods demonstrate sophisticated understanding of the evidence tracking system he exploits. When firearms arrive designated for destruction after cases conclude, he processes them normally into the system with proper documentation. But instead of sending them to the destruction contractor, he creates false destruction certificates claiming items were properly destroyed. The weapons actually get removed from the facility in equipment bags during his evening shifts when fewer staff are present. The falsified paperwork makes it appear the weapons were destroyed according to procedure, hiding the theft within normal legitimate operations. The agent recruits intermediaries to distribute stolen weapons, carefully insulating himself from direct contact with end buyers. He identifies individuals with criminal connections who can move weapons into illegal markets without asking questions about sources. These intermediaries purchase weapons from the agent at wholesale prices, typically $300 to $500 per firearm, regardless of retail value. The intermediaries then resell to dealers in criminal networks, who distribute to end users across state lines. The system creates multiple layers between the agent and final buyers, providing plausible deniability if investigators trace weapons back toward their source. The scale of theft grows gradually as the agent gains confidence in his methods. Initial thefts of occasional weapons expand to systematic weekly removals as he realizes how easy the process is when he controls both documentation and physical access. Over 6 years, he steals over 2,000 weapons from evidence storage, generating illegal proceeds exceeding $1 million. The volume represents only a small percentage of total weapons processed through the facility, making the thefts difficult to detect through statistical analysis of inventory discrepancies. Financial benefits from the scheme, allow the agent to improve his lifestyle significantly beyond what his federal salary supports. He purchases a vacation property, drives expensive vehicles, and makes investments that should raise questions given his income level. But the improvements happen gradually enough to avoid immediate suspicion, and he maintains his normal work performance and professional demeanor. Colleagues notice his apparent financial success, but assume he has family money or successful investments, rather than suspecting systematic evidence theft. The agent's corruption extends beyond simple theft into active obstruction of justice. Some weapons he steals come from serious cases including murders, armed robberies, and organized crime investigations. These weapons represent critical evidence that prosecutors need for trials. When the agent removes them and creates false destruction paperwork, he eliminates evidence that could secure convictions. Several prosecutions fail or result in plea deals because key evidence weapons supposedly destroyed during routine processing mysteriously don't exist when needed for court presentations. Defense attorneys begin noticing a troubling pattern when evidence weapons disappear before trials. In multiple cases spanning 3 years, prosecutors admit they cannot present firearms evidence because items were supposedly destroyed prematurely due to administrative errors. The pattern seems statistically improbable, with too many weapons from serious cases mysteriously destroyed before trials conclude. One attorney files a formal complaint with the federal court, alleging systemic problems in evidence management that violate defendants' rights to confront evidence against them. The complaint triggers an internal audit of the evidence facility's weapons section. Auditors review records from the past 5 years, comparing documentation of weapons received against destruction certificates and court presentation logs. They discover significant discrepancies. Hundreds of weapons supposedly destroyed according to certificates, yet no corresponding approvals from prosecutors or judges authorizing destruction while cases remained active. The pattern suggests systematic falsification of destruction records rather than occasional administrative errors. Internal affairs investigators take over when the audit findings indicate potential criminal activity rather than mere procedural failures. They review all destruction certificates the agent processed over 6 years, interviewing the destruction contractor who supposedly received and destroyed the weapons. The contractor's records don't match the agent's certificates, showing far fewer weapons actually received for destruction than the agent documented as destroyed. The discrepancy proves hundreds of weapons disappeared from evidence storage without legitimate destruction, strongly suggesting theft. Investigators expand the probe to trace stolen weapons into circulation. They cross-reference serial numbers from supposedly destroyed evidence weapons against the ATF's crime gun database, tracking firearms recovered from crime scenes. The search reveals that dozens of weapons the agent certified as destroyed later appeared at crime scenes across 7 states. The evidence proves the weapons weren't destroyed, but instead entered criminal circulation through unknown channels. The agent becomes the prime suspect given his exclusive control over the weapons section and his role in creating the falsified destruction documentation. Financial forensics teams analyze the agent's banking records and asset purchases. They discover lifestyle improvements inconsistent with his federal salary, including property purchases, vehicle acquisitions, and investment activities suggesting unreported income sources. Structured cash deposits appear in his accounts, classic money laundering behavior designed to avoid reporting thresholds. The financial evidence indicates illegal income substantially exceeding his legitimate earnings, supporting the theory that he profited from systematic evidence theft. Surveillance begins on the agent without his knowledge, monitoring his movements and communications to identify any intermediaries or buyers involved in distributing stolen weapons. Investigators observe him meeting regularly with individuals who have criminal records and known associations with illegal firearms trafficking. Some meetings happen during his work shifts, with the agent leaving the evidence facility briefly to meet contacts in nearby parking lots. The surveillance documents a pattern suggesting active coordination of illegal weapons distribution. An undercover operation launches when investigators identify one of the agent's intermediaries. An undercover agent poses as a dealer seeking reliable weapons sources, making contact through mutual associates in criminal networks. The intermediary eventually mentions his connection to a source who can provide clean items with paperwork problems that make them untraceable. The undercover agent expresses strong interest, and over several weeks builds the relationship until the intermediary agrees to introduce him to the source. The meeting with the agent happens at a location away from the evidence facility. The agent is cautious, questioning the undercover agent extensively before discussing his operation. Eventually, he explains in coded language that he has access to inventory that needs to disappear and can provide weapons regularly if payment terms are satisfactory. The undercover agent records the conversation, capturing the agent explicitly discussing his ability to steal evidence weapons and his expectations for payment. The recording provides devastating evidence of systematic corruption. Additional undercover purchases over 8 weeks build an overwhelming case. The agent provides weapons that investigators verify came from evidence storage, complete with serial numbers matching supposedly destroyed items. He discusses his methods for falsifying destruction certificates and his schedule for when thefts are safest, based on facility staffing. He grows confident enough to mention the scale of his operation, claiming he's moved thousands of weapons over years without detection. Each statement gets recorded. Each weapon gets documented as evidence. Federal prosecutors coordinate with internal affairs to plan the arrest carefully. The agent's position within the evidence facility creates unique challenges because his arrest could compromise numerous ongoing investigations if not handled properly. Prosecutors must review every case the agent touched to determine which might be tainted by evidence tampering or theft. The scope proves massive, involving over 300 active investigations and countless closed cases where evidence weapons passed through his hands. The arrest happens when the agent reports for an evening shift. Internal affairs agents and federal marshals meet him in the parking lot before he can enter the facility, preventing him from accessing evidence or destroying additional documentation. The agent is placed under arrest immediately, with agents seizing his credentials, keys, and electronic devices. He invokes his right to counsel without making statements, recognizing that resistance or explanation will only create additional evidence against him. The search of the evidence facility under the agent's management reveals the full scope of systematic theft and falsification. Investigators find blank destruction certificates, equipment bags containing weapons awaiting removal, and documentation showing hundreds of falsified destruction records. Computer forensics recover deleted files showing spreadsheets tracking stolen weapons, dates of removal, and payments received. The evidence demonstrates meticulous record-keeping of criminal activity, with the agent apparently maintaining detailed accounts of his illegal operation while simultaneously falsifying official records. Simultaneous raids target the intermediaries and dealers identified through the investigation. Federal agents and local police execute search warrants across 7 states, arresting 12 individuals involved in distributing the stolen evidence weapons. Each location yields additional evidence, including weapons traced back to the evidence facility, financial records showing payments to intermediaries, and communications coordinating distribution. The coordinated operation dismantles the entire network in one action, preventing warnings from spreading and giving suspects time to destroy evidence. The agent's arrest devastates morale within the federal law enforcement community. Colleagues who trusted him for years struggle to comprehend his betrayal. The evidence facility undergoes complete review of all procedures, with every active case examined to to determine whether critical evidence might have been compromised. Prosecutors face the difficult task of notifying defense attorneys in hundreds of cases that evidence handling may have been tainted by corruption, potentially undermining convictions that relied on evidence the agent processed. Media coverage proves catastrophic for the agency's reputation. Headlines emphasize the betrayal of trust by someone responsible for protecting evidence integrity. Critics question how systematic theft continued for 6 years without detection, despite procedures supposedly designed to prevent such corruption. Congressional oversight committees schedule hearings demanding explanations for the supervision failure that allowed an evidence room agent to steal thousands of weapons while holding a position of special trust. The investigation expands to trace weapons through extended distribution chains, reaching beyond the immediate intermediaries. Some stolen evidence weapons traveled through multiple resales before appearing at crime scenes. Investigators work to identify all individuals who purchased or possessed the stolen weapons, charging them with appropriate violations. The effort becomes a multi-year project as agents trace weapons across multiple states and through complex networks. Financial recovery efforts focus on seizing assets purchased with illegal proceeds. The agent invested theft profits in real estate, vehicles, and various businesses. Asset forfeiture proceedings target all property traceable to the illegal income, recovering over $800,000 in assets, though substantial proceeds remain hidden or spent. Victims of crimes committed with stolen evidence weapons file claims against seized assets, creating complex litigation over how recovered funds should be distributed. Trial proceedings begin 14 months after arrest. Prosecutors present overwhelming evidence including the undercover recordings, falsified destruction certificates, weapons traced from evidence storage to crime scenes, financial records documenting illegal proceeds, and testimony from cooperating intermediaries. The agent's defense attempts to argue entrapment and claims that stress from budget cuts and understaffing drove him to desperation. Arguments that fail given evidence showing systematic theft for profit over 6 years, rather than isolated desperate acts. Conviction comes swiftly after 3 weeks of testimony. Jurors find the agent guilty on all counts, including theft of government property, fraud, obstruction of justice, weapons trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy. The conviction provides some accountability for betrayal that damaged countless investigations and enabled violence with stolen weapons. Victims whose cases were compromised by the agent's theft attend the verdict reading, finding limited satisfaction in seeing justice for the corruption that undermined their cases. Sentencing occurs 6 weeks after conviction. Federal guidelines call for severe punishment given the agent's position of trust, the duration of systematic theft, the obstruction of justice through evidence destruction, and the violent crimes enabled by stolen weapons. Prosecutors argue for maximum sentences, emphasizing that corruption by evidence custodians represents catastrophic betrayal undermining the entire justice system's integrity. The judge sentences the agent to 32 years in federal prison. The sentence includes 20 years for evidence theft and weapons trafficking, 8 years for obstruction of justice, and 4 years for money laundering and fraud, with terms running partially consecutively. The judge also orders complete forfeiture of all assets purchased with illegal proceeds, restitution to the government totaling $1.2 million, and lifetime prohibition from federal employment. The harsh sentence sends clear messages about consequences for corrupting the evidence system that makes criminal justice possible. The evidence facility undergoes complete restructuring after the case. New procedures require two-person verification for all evidence handling, automated inventory tracking using RFID technology, random audits by independent teams, and direct camera surveillance of all evidence processing areas. The facility staff gets expanded to eliminate situations where individuals work alone with evidence access. The goal is making systematic theft by trusted insiders effectively impossible through technological and procedural safeguards. Congressional hearings examine how the theft continued undetected despite existing procedures. Agency leadership testifies about resource constraints that forced procedural compromises, the difficulty of detecting corruption by trusted personnel who understand oversight systems, and reforms being implemented. Lawmakers appropriate additional funding for evidence facility staffing and modernization. Recognizing that proper evidence security requires adequate resources that were lacking during budget cut periods when the agent's theft began. The case damages relationships between federal prosecutors and defense attorneys. Defense attorneys cite the corruption when challenging evidence in other cases, arguing that systematic theft by evidence custodians undermines confidence in all evidence handling. Prosecutors must work to demonstrate that enhanced procedures now prevent similar corruption, and that specific cases weren't affected by the agent's theft. The litigation spawned by the scandal continues for years. Professional associations develop new training programs emphasizing ethics and corruption prevention for evidence custodians. The agent's case becomes required study material demonstrating how trusted insiders can exploit procedural knowledge and supervisory gaps to commit systematic theft. Training emphasizes the importance of continuous oversight, even for personnel with excellent performance records, and the need for technological safeguards against human corruption. 5 years after the arrest, federal agents continue tracing stolen evidence weapons as they appear in criminal investigations. Each recovery provides additional evidence linking back to the corrupt agent and sometimes leads to arrests of individuals who purchased or possessed the stolen weapons. The full impact of 6 years of systematic evidence theft may never be completely quantified, but investigators acknowledge hundreds of weapons remain in criminal circulation. For prosecutors whose cases were compromised by the agent's theft of critical evidence, the scandal creates lasting professional impacts. Several cases resulted in acquittals or reduced charges because evidence weapons disappeared, allowing defendants who might have been convicted to escape appropriate accountability. Prosecutors face questions about evidence security in subsequent cases, with defense attorneys referencing the corruption to challenge evidence reliability generally. The agent's family suffers consequences beyond his imprisonment. His wife divorces him within months of conviction, seeking to distance herself from the scandal and protect assets not subject to forfeiture. His children face social stigma associated with their father's crimes. The family's financial situation collapses as forfeiture proceedings seize property purchased with illegal proceeds, leaving them with only assets clearly purchased through legitimate income. Appeals focus on challenging the severity of the sentence and arguing that evidence handling procedures were inadequate, creating temptation that should mitigate punishment. Appellate courts reject these arguments, finding that the agent received extensive training in evidence procedures and deliberately chose to violate his position of trust for personal profit over 6 years. The conviction and sentence become final, with the agent currently serving time and projected release not until the 2050s. The destroyed evidence facility's reputation gradually recovers through demonstrated commitment to enhanced security procedures and transparency about past failures. New leadership implements open-door policies, allowing regular inspections by outside auditors and defense attorney observers. The technological improvements, including RFID tracking and comprehensive camera coverage, create systems where theft is effectively impossible. The facility eventually regains confidence from prosecutors and judges, who recognize that current procedures differ dramatically from those existing during the corruption period. The story concludes with recognition that insider threats represent unique challenges requiring constant vigilance. The agent succeeded for years because his trusted position allowed operation with minimal oversight once he established reputation for reliability. But once audit discrepancies triggered focused investigation, patient work assembled overwhelming evidence leading to successful prosecution. The balance between trusting personnel and maintaining effective oversight remains an ongoing challenge requiring sustained commitment. Vigilance against insider corruption remains essential because positions of trust create opportunities for those willing to betray that trust. The evidence room theft demonstrated that even personnel with years of excellent service can engage in systematic criminal activity if oversight proves inadequate. Only comprehensive technological safeguards, regular audits, and multiple-person verification systems can effectively prevent corruption by insiders who understand the systems they're supposed to protect. The work of preventing and detecting insider threats never ends, requiring constant adaptation as determined criminals seek new methods to exploit positions of trust.